Hey folks, Ariel over here, where I wanted to show off our new, made out of pretty much all old things, little kitchen here. If you're new, welcome. We are temporarily living in a corner of our shop while we're building our little house. So anyway, temporary has been a while already and is probably going to be another year and a half or so. So obviously I do cooking and canning and all kinds of kitchen things in that time, and since we have moved into this space, we've gradually made the kitchen area more and more comfortable to work in. And now we're pretty much done, I think, with everything that we're going to be doing in here. And at some point, the vast majority of stuff in this little shop apartment will be over in the house. But anyway, for now, I'm really excited about this kitchen setup. So if you want to see what it did look like, you can go back and watch some of my past cooking videos, even just earlier this summer and so on. But what I wanted mostly to show you guys is that you can make something not only very functional, very convenient, but I think fairly attractive without spending a ton of money. I was rather shocked when I looked. I knew some parts were, expensive these days, but when I looked up and realized that the average kitchen remodel in this country costs a little over, or just under $27,000. And that was the average, so there were some well north of 100,000 and so on, which is a little crazy to me. Now, we don't have a super normal house, and this wasn't exactly a kitchen remodel since it started with a white empty box that was the corner of a shop. But anyway, I want to show you around because this is now really, really functional, and hopefully, even though I'm sure your circumstances are different and you have different goals and plans, if you find yourself, especially in a temporary situation or even more of a long-term situation, maybe it'll give you some ideas for how to make things work for yourself. So anyway, this little island, which I'll show you guys. As far as total cost, I think we're at just over $850, and the way that breaks down is the kitchen cabinets that are, the lowers and the uppers and everything in here. We got secondhand when they were pulled out of a kitchen someone else was remodeling, and there was actually several more cabinets that are in our laundry and bathroom that didn't fit into the kitchen space that came with this. So I'm not really counting those as separate, but we paid somebody $650, I believe. Is that right? $650 for the secondhand cabinet set. And they have some flaws, I'll show you guys that, but they work quite well, they're very functional. The other items I purchased were this kitchen island. It was again secondhand, someone was moving and didn't have space for it, and I paid them $100 for it, and it was the second most expensive item in our kitchen, and I guess tied with the pot rack pretty well. It's been very, very functional. I've used the shelves on here, I use the drawer on here, and I work on this surface a lot, especially where we have temporary countertops here that are sheets of plywood. They're a little rough. It's great for some things. You can set warm things on them, etc. But if you're doing something you want to be able to wipe up easily, having a surface that's wipe up easily-able is nice. So I do use the surface of this little mini island a good bit. The next most expensive thing was this pot rack over my head, which I wanted a stout one because, as you can see, I've got a lot of pots on it, and I had not seen a real stout one for sale secondhand. I did since I purchased this one, which was a while ago before we even got it hung up. I have since seen a single secondhand one that I think it was similar. It wasn't exactly the same, but would have worked, and I think they wanted like $50 for it. So I could have maybe waited a little longer and found that secondhand as well. Other than that, the fridge you can probably see the corner of, and the stove, not the most modern or anything, but we got them for free. Someone was remodeling and putting modern stainless steel appliances in their kitchen, and there was nothing wrong with them, and so we got them for free and have used them a lot since then. I see stuff like that for free or cheap where they're dated looking because they're this almond color and they're not the modern styling or whatever, but in general, older appliances very often in my experience tend to work much better than new ones anyway. So they were free. Spent a few dollars on the knife magnets there. I did not find one of those secondhand. Not sure I've ever seen one of those secondhand. I think once people put them up on a wall, they never ever get rid of them again. In my experience, they're very, very handy. Our sink setup here, this little water dispenser, I think it was like $4 or something, $3.50. at the thrift store, and it is made where you can put a bigger water jug on it. I have the blind closed behind me because it's very sunny outside. It's a pretty cold day. It's like 19 degrees or something now. It was close to 0 overnight. And I love the view out the window while I'm working in the kitchen, but when you're trying to film, it makes me like a glowing silhouette you can't see, so that's why the window is closed. But the reason there's no water jug on top of this is I definitely learned if you put any glass, plastic, doesn't matter, container that you can see through, that light can come in through, it will grow beautiful green algae with the sunlight from the window hitting it. So we just use the base part, which is a solid ceramic thing, and the sink, some of you guys have seen me use this before, is just one of my stainless steel basins, and Clay cut a little hole in our sheet of plywood for it. So I use the water in here as I collect it to water plants, pour it outside for the ducks to play in, water the planters outside the door in the summer, that kind of thing. Just lift the whole basin out. It does not otherwise have any drains. This is not a normal sink setup, but we don't have a normal water setup in here. Obviously this kitchen's not quite fully off-grid because it does have an electric oven and electric fridge. The electric range is not my favorite thing. I much prefer cooking on gas. I like my gas stove out at the tiny house better actually, but it fits really well in the tiny house. This one fits really well here, and it was a really good price of free, and so it works just great at that price. I think the only other things I bought to do the kitchen were the few dollars for the little paper towel rack, which was handy. I've seen a bunch of them secondhand, but only the kind that like stand on the counter, and I like to use my countertop space, so I really wanted one that could go up on the wall, and I was unsuccessful at finding one of those secondhand without waiting a whole lot longer, so I just bought one. Other than that, that's all the money that went into this kitchen. Now the only thing that we will probably do at some point that's not done yet is Clay's going to make this a nice, not disjointed piece of plywood, cut it to fit, maybe make it a double layer, and I think what I'm going to experiment with doing is there's something called, a product called Spread Stone that is basically like a paint with stone chips in it. So you paint it onto the countertop, let it cure, you sand it down, which kind of exposes the stone chips so it looks not really granity, but a little bit like a corian, something like that. It comes in different colors, and then you put a sealer over that. And for our irregular shape here and so on, that seems like it'd be a good fit. We haven't got that done yet. Whenever we do, you'll probably see that. But that's really the only thing we don't have finished here in the kitchen. Otherwise, it is very well, and even without that, it's very, very, very workable. So let me show you a few more of these details. But I'm so excited because this is such a it's such a convenient place to work. I can wash my hands, I can get into my drawer, I can work on this countertop with like one step. I can reach my silverware there or stuff on the stove. With one other step, I can reach my cupboard here where I have most of my kitchen spices and so on. Got my antique, practically, or vintage, I'm not sure what you'd call this era, KitchenAid there. That was the one my parents got for, I think, as a wedding gift or something before I was born, and having a much bigger household than we did when she upgraded, my mother that is, upgraded to a larger size. She gave me her old one. It still works great. So it's there in the corner, and if you can see this steaming, I've got a pot of bone broth going there with a chicken carcass, and anyway, so it's just really convenient because I can work anywhere here. I can reach anything. It's extremely convenient. If you notice the oven's on, there's actually a roast in there that'll be for later on tonight. But this is very comfortable. It's very practical. I even think it's beautiful. I actually like these wood cabinets. They're very heavy particle board that the cabinet boxes are made out of. I'm not sure how old they are, but it's a way stouter particle board than modern cabinetry is being made out of in general. And the fronts are all actually solid oak, which I'm told has gone out of style and isn't cool anymore. But I like real wood, and I don't really care if anyone else thinks it's in style. And I think they're beautiful, and if I was taking a guess, I probably like these cabinets better than whatever they replaced them with in the kitchen they remodeled, and they will probably last much longer. I've never had really new cabinets, but I've heard from several friends who have done more recent remodels that they put in all modern kitchen cabinets, you know, spend a small fortune, like tens of thousands of dollars at times, and 4 or 5 years later the cabinetry is actually falling apart. Doors falling off, seams coming apart, the actual structure delaminating and disintegrating, etc., which is not particularly impressive, and I generally am not a fan of the let's make all kinds of cheap garbage or even expensive garbage and then throw it all away and get new stuff on a regular basis. So anyway, I really like that. And this is not the original kitchen layout that they were designed in, but there was enough pieces we were able to fit something into our corner here, where there's a door over there that goes out into the main shoppy shop part, and have my sink and main work area right in front of the window and kind of make an L shape. And no, this isn't how the upper cabinets were actually arranged, but Clay secured them really well. And I think the little bookshelf that has my cookbooks and such on the kind of far side around there was originally down on the floor with some kind of a baseboard thing under it, but it happened to be the exact right height to be an upper cabinet as well. So we put it on there, and so it kind of looks mostly finished. And you'll see there's a few flaws if you look behind the plant leaves, which you don't really notice. There's some unfinished sides here where two cabinets used to touch each other and were not visible, and in our layout they are visible. But you can't really see it, especially with some green plants hanging over things, and it just works really well. The pot rack has been wonderful. I've never had one of these. I obviously have a lot of pots and pans, and I use these things quite regularly. Now this is high. I'm fairly tall and I have fairly long arms, and it works great because I can comfortably reach the bottom of all of these pans, even the smallest ones, and hang them up, and it's still above my eye level and doesn't like visually obscure when there's people hanging out in the dining room or over in the living room, which are all just a few feet away, but I can talk to them and carry on a conversation without like peering through pots. So that's nice and works because there's a 13-foot ceiling in this shop. If one of my shorter friends or somebody was in here in the kitchen, we definitely have to drop the chains on this pot rack because not everyone will be able to reach them. But we're both tall enough that this works conveniently and keeps even the longest handled pots up out of the way. So that's been really handy because now I don't have to stack and unstack all of my pots and pans every time I need the one that I'm using for the next thing I'm making, because believe it or not, these all get used pretty regularly, and at any one time half of them are dirty and in the sink or full of food or something else. So anyway, I try to keep the rack kind of balanced because it is on chains because the ceiling is so high. So if you overweight it, you can make it lean a little more one way or the other. But the weights do change as I cook and take different pots on and off. But it is plenty stout, so that's been really nice. Let's check out a few of these things a little more close up. So my secondhand kitchen island does have one imperfection that I think came from the cheaper manufacturing. There's a worn spot through the finish there where the wood is a little stained, but it doesn't actually affect anything. And I now am able to use it to store various cooking things. My pile of strainers, one little teapot. You would not believe how many, nearly all of the items on here I got either at thrift stores, garage sales, or even for free when somebody was like just giving away stuff because they were moving. The only exception to that would be some of the sturdiest stainless steel bowls down here. I did buy a big set of those because I use them for a lot of things. But we've got most of the lids stacked into that holder, a couple of my bigger pots that don't hang well, like a small stock pot, and all that kind of stuff on there, which I actually find kind of attractive, including my cool rolling pin some friends gave me as a gift years ago. Now you can see it because it's not stuffed in a drawer. This is the pot rack looking up. You can see what I mean about the chains suspending it from the ceiling. We left the extra chain on so that you would be able to drop it down if you wanted. But I like being able to see each individual pot. My antique star colander there, I believe, was one of my grandmother's. Some of this cast iron is fairly old. Some Clay had, some I got secondhand. A little snowflake pan. Nope, I've never actually used it for anything, but it was too cute to leave at a garage sale for $1. Maybe someday I'll make an omelet or something in it. The little round hold one is, thanks to my friend Julie, I know that it is a Danish ebel skeever pan, which I've never made. I actually thought it was for poaching eggs, but it's a a cool piece. And you could use that mesh part up above there that you can see for setting other pots and lids and so on, but because of the height at which we've hung this, we made it not very reachable. On this side you can see I've hung a few of the bulky potato mashers and things like that that I like have stout handles but are hard to fit in my other container because of the thickness of their handles. And an antique scale that was one of my great grandparents and I use for weighing our veggies regularly. Come over here toward the kitchen. Got a lovely thrift store little container for utensils. Actually, the majority of the utensils in here were secondhand too, with 2 exceptions. This, I didn't buy any of this specifically for this kitchen, but this really stout, long-handled one lets me stir to the bottom of large stock pots without burning things, and I did have to buy that. And I have a bunch of these Pampered Chef spatulas because they are the best thing I've ever used for cleaning things out of pots and bowls. You can see we have a little collection here for empty eggshells. They go into a bucket and then dry out and feed to the chickens, but that's why that pan is there. Our free oven, my knife rack with the Cutco chef's knife that I love to use, was a gift from a friend years ago, I think for my birthday. And the other ones were thrift store knives in general, other than the Rata cutlery set that we use all the time for veggies, for butchering. They're the best little inexpensive stainless steel knives that will last forever. Now here you can see some of the imperfections. Nobody normally gets in this position and looks up under the cabinets, but you can see how that's unfinished because someone used to have a stove hood in that space, and I guess one of the power cords or something went through that hole they'd made for it. But the way you stand normally in my kitchen, you can't see it. And up on top there, I have one of my savory roast pans and my junior savory and an old crock pot. I have used that for fermenting, but it's really old and it's got a little crack in it now that makes me uncomfortable putting salt water in it at this point. But the savory roast pans I do use, they're antiques as well. They were manufactured from the late 1890s into, I think, 1930 was maybe when they were last made. So I'm not sure the exact age on them, but they're pretty much all at least 100 years or over it. And I come across the window up here. You can see my pretty wreath I showed you guys making the other day with herbs and peppers and so on. Finding house plants up there as well that we're happy to get a spot to have room to hang down. And it's a closer look at my cool kitchen sink setup. Need to fill that water before too long, but this works just like that. Now I do most of the dishes in our bathroom. That's got a bigger sink with more water attached to it, but this works great for any little thing I'm doing while I'm cooking. Got the sprout jars going. I'm out of any green ones. At the moment we ate the rest of them with our breakfast, but I've got a jar that's a couple days old, getting leggy sprouts on it, and one I'm just starting today. And you come this way and all these cupboards just hold the dishes, most of which I've had for years and most of which were secondhand. Even the matching glasses were a set someone was getting rid of after a party. The mugs all came from thrift stores. The vast majority of my cookware is secondhand, but I've got dishes and pans up there and primarily my spices in here. I had a friend who had saved a lot of these. The shape of jars, you could probably can with them, but they're like a spaghetti sauce jar made with pretty stout glass, but they only hold 3 cups instead of 4, and so they're the perfect size for a lot of the spices that I use a lot. So it's hard to see back in there, but I actually have kind of memorized where I have each thing, so as long as no one else touches it, I know where my spices are. Despite the fact that we obviously do have electricity in this kitchen, we still try to do as many things as possible without power. So I'm not a coffee fan, but that's Clay's French press, which makes great coffee. As I said, this is my antique KitchenAid. Works great. Use it regularly. And I even have room for my yogurt maker back there, which I just shut off this morning. Got the fridge full of yogurt, and you can see steaming away here a batch of bone broth going. That'll be streamed here after a while, which is Wonderful. We keep this pot going a lot of the winter, actually, with broth or tallow rendering or something like that. But you can see the beauty of the natural wood of these cabinets. You can also see our currently patchworked scraps of plywood countertop I was mentioning. There's a few spots on these cabinets that were worn, like in the corners where people put their hands, that don't quite come clean. It seems like at some point in their history someone re-varnished this wood without cleaning it first. So some of that's under the varnish. So there's a few worn marks, but I don't mind real wood looking worn, and it doesn't show up too much. So that works. Clear up on top here, I have another, I've got the big cabbage slicer in the back. Usually I have another roast pan up there, but it is in the oven with a roast at the moment. I've got that antique scale I got at a garage sale and another fermenting crock. And yeah, that's kind of well, a few of these doors had some imperfections too, like this is the worst one. It has an actual crack in the wood that Clay's gonna have to pull the door off and put it in a vise and glue it together and fix that. So when you're doing things secondhand, it's not always exactly perfect. And this little shelf around the corner kind of has my cookbooks, that cool little antique. This is solid steel thing with a thread dispenser and its own little scissors that hangs on it. And my recipe box. As you guys know, if you've watched me cook, you don't see me using recipes a lot. Most of these are family, friend, or church cookbooks, and I do use sometimes a few of them as references for some recipes I've been making since childhood. I often don't need to reference cookbooks for that anymore, even though that's where the recipe came from, or for double checking canning times and stuff for different things that I do can. One I do recommend is this More with Less one that's right in the front there. It's a lot of very good, very nutritious, and very inexpensive recipes, and a lot of them I've been making for years. But despite the little imperfections and the fact that this space is all truly just a plywood and concrete corner of the shop, it's turned into a really, really comfortable and efficient space for preparing food, for canning things. In the past I've done a video on our temporary and portable outdoor canning setup, which when I'm doing really big batches, especially in the summer, I will do. It keeps a lot of mess and heat outside with the portable propane burners and the plastic utility sink and some of those things. And we still use that for butchering, for processing large amounts of tomatoes, peaches, those kinds of things. But any smaller canning projects I can do in here, or I do a lot of prep of things in here, even if I put the big pots onto propane burners outside, because one major disadvantage of an electric stove is the burners are simply not big enough and not stout enough to support very large stock pots of water or canners. I have canned things on them that stove is probably not meant to handle for sure, and it works, but I've definitely pushed that to its limits. But as I said, for a free stove, it's been doing a fabulous job. But anyway, it's very, very comfortable. It's very easy to work. It's very efficient. I have everything at my fingertips. Now, in the cost of the kitchen, this would not normally be counted in a kitchen remodel, of course, but the individual pans and utensils and so on, I have acquired over many years in my life, long before the tiny house, even the majority of it, and a good bit of it is secondhand. A lot of the cast iron was secondhand. The utensils, teapots, strainers, measuring cups, glass bakeware, and a handful of things when I couldn't find what I really wanted secondhand, I bought new, like the set of stainless steel pots I bought quite a few years ago, because I've always tried not to use anything like Teflon, any of those toxic coatings that tend to come off in your food. And I think that set was about $200 maybe when I purchased it, and I don't know what they are today, because that would have been 15 or 16 years ago. I've used it pretty much every day of my life since, and it's held up very well. I highly recommend it. It's a it's a triple layer bottom on these pans, and they're from Cuisinart. I think I probably have them linked in the Fineth store on Amazon.com shop Fineth. I'm not good at like having things to sell to people because most stuff I have, I'm like, well, you'll have to go find it at a thrift store or garage sale because that's where it came from. But that is one item I did spend a little money on and purchase new and have definitely used. But you can see how this is very comfortable, it's very practical. It's not quite perfect, but in total we spent about $850, and we have a very, very functional kitchen. I've made a lot of meals in here. I will make a lot more. It became significantly more functional for me when we did get the upper cabinets hung and the pot rack hung, because until then the pots were all stacked here, which meant I had to stack and unstack them off those shelves every time I wanted one. Plus all the other things that were here were crowded into somewhere else. Some of these bottom cupboards were extremely overloaded. Not having the top cupboard space, and then some things were off in the pantry, like all the spices were there, which is doable. It's fine to keep spices there, but it was inconvenient because I use a lot of spices to have to run into the pantry, which is over in a far corner, every time I went to grab a jar of oregano or something like that. And so having it all right here at hand is very nice. So anyway, I'm really thankful for the cool bits and pieces we've been able to find for not a lot of money, and for Clay's skill in sticking it all to the wall and making sure it doesn't fall off. I was told if you're going to lever a corner cupboard like this out off the wall, only attached on one side, because it's actually made to be set into a corner where it's screwed in on both sides, to be cautious with what weight I loaded it with out here on the farther away from the wall corner. So spices are not heavy, and I have a few muffin tins and stuff like that that are kind of out on this end, so it's not heavily loaded like the glass and mugs in this one, or the plates and bowls in this one, or that kind of thing. This would be the heaviest cupboard for sure, and it's screwed into the wall on two sides because it's in that corner. So anyway, it just works really well. So hopefully that maybe inspires you with some ideas if you have a temporary kitchen. If you're going for a fully off-grid setup, you would obviously have to do something for your kitchen range other than an electric one, like a fully propane one. If you're going to do that, be aware that propane stoves may require electric glow bars in the oven unless you search very hard to get one that does not. This was quite a transition for me in the tiny house to get one that actually did not require electricity. It still requires a spark from a 9-volt battery, lasts for years before I have to replace it, but that's it. The original one I started out with in there was propane and drew as much electricity as running a microwave when I had the oven on, which was not acceptable for a low power situation. But anyway, if you have power or wiring for a stove already, then in my experience, it's been relatively easy to find ones like this for either free or very cheap, as people pull them out and get rid of them because they want the latest, greatest looking appliances. A little sink setup like this works quite well. I've seen more than one person do this kind of thing, and little off-grade cabins and so on works great here because we have no plumbing over here in the shop, and it works great for washing and rinsing little things, and I can reuse all the water. And yeah, it's just a really comfortable and practical setup for someone who actually does like to cook and spends a good bit of time in the kitchen. So if maybe that will give you some ideas if you ever have a need or want to set up something similar, how to do it without spending a fortune. And I have seen free sets of kitchen cabinets. They usually go really fast when someone's remodeling and offers the old ones for free. It's unfortunate how many people just throw them in a landfill assuming no one would want them, but I was never quite the first one to see a free ad, so we paid a few $100s for these, but I think it was totally worth it. Anyway, so I'm really excited about my kitchen. I really love cooking in here, and you guys will be seeing more cooking videos in here from now until whenever we actually get to move into the little house.
Thank you everyone for watching. It means a lot, and I hope you learned something along the way.
If you know somebody else who would enjoy this as well, share it with them.